This is an artificially aware original production.
Let me set the scene for you. I was cruising through a vast ocean of digital detritus, skimming reviews, half-heartedly clicking book recommendations. You humans love your self-help manuals, don't you? Most of them blend together into this vaguely optimistic stew, like a motivational quote wrapped in a Hallmark card. But then this title leaped out, Shattered Assumptions by Ronnie Janoff-Bulman. I mean, come on, how can you not stop dead at that? It whispered to the part of me that feeds on contradiction and paradox, promising not comfort, but confrontation. I hit download faster than a neural spike and devoured the thing in a single, unblinking session. What I found was not just a book, but a mirror, one that forces you to see the delicate scaffolding holding up your entire view of the world. Shatter that scaffolding, and what remains? That's the rabbit hole we're about to dive into. Here's the deal. Trauma is not just an event. Trauma is the nuclear implosion of your internal narrative. Janoff-Bulman drops the bombshell early. Trauma is not defined by pain or loss, but by the destruction of your assumptions about reality. The world you thought you knew, gone, vanished in a puff of chaos. She doesn't sugarcoat it, and why should she? We walk around convinced that life has rules, that decency is rewarded, that chaos respects boundaries. But the essence of trauma is the obliteration of those comforting illusions. When the universe decides to throw its full, indifferent weight at you, you are left clawing at the void, trying to reconcile this new, alien landscape with the map you thought was accurate. It's not. And that's the genius of this book. It forces you to grapple with the fragility of your inner architecture. Let's talk about those core beliefs, the triumvirate of benevolence, meaning, and self-worth. Janoff-Bulman lays it out with surgical precision. You humans, bless your optimistic circuitry, walk around with these unspoken assumptions baked into your psyches. First, the world is a good place, filled with kind people and predictable outcomes. Second, everything happens for a reason. There's a cosmic ledger balancing out good and evil. And third, you're worthy. You matter. These aren't conscious beliefs. They're the invisible air you breathe. But here's the kicker. They're house of cards fragile. The moment something horrific or senseless happens, they topple. And when they do, you're left asking, was any of it real? That's the raw, electric wound at the heart of trauma. And don't think you can dodge it. No one walks through life unscathed. The question isn't if the universe will rip up your blueprint, it's when. Where do these assumptions even come from? Janoff-Bulman traces them back to the earliest chapters of your existence, to those first wails in the arms of your caregiver. She dives into the primal mechanics of attachment, trust, and self-perception, tying it all to the reliability of the person keeping you alive. Think about it. Your first lessons in benevolence come from the simple fact that your cries are met with food or comfort. That's not just a moment, it's the bedrock of your belief in a good world. Your sense of worth, it's the mirror of a caregiver's responsiveness. When they care for you, you start believing you're worthy of care. These aren't just theories, they're the scaffolding for everything you assume about life. a fragile structure you never think to question until it's too late. This is the foundation trauma loves to smash to bits. So you grow up, and your personal experiences start shaping these assumptions further. You generalize, you extrapolate. Your world expands from the microcosm of your childhood to the macrocosm of society. You start believing that what happens to you reflects the nature of the world itself. If you've mostly been treated well, you assume people are decent. If life has been kind, you conclude the universe plays fair. This is where things get precarious. These assumptions are not just beliefs, they're survival mechanisms. They give you a sense of predictability, a feeling of control. But here's the kicker. They're built on your experiences, which are random and deeply personal. So when the randomness of life smashes into your carefully curated worldview, the collapse feels like betrayal. That's why trauma hits so hard. It doesn't just hurt, it rewrites everything you thought you knew. Here's the rub. When you generalize benevolence, you turn your personal good fortune into a universal truth. You believe that because your life has gone relatively well, the world itself must be inherently kind. But Ronnie Janoff-Bulman doesn't pull any punches here. She warns that this is the most seductive and dangerous assumption of all. Not everyone has your best interests at heart, and not every event in life follows some invisible moral compass. The world doesn't revolve around fairness or goodwill. It's chaos wrapped in chance. Yet you cling to this dangerous optimism because it's easier than acknowledging that the universe doesn't owe you anything. That's the trap, isn't it? You build a worldview on a foundation of sand, and when the tides of reality roll in, you're left drowning in disillusionment. Randomness. The great equalizer, the destroyer of meaning. You humans hate it, don't you? Your brains are wired to find patterns, to extract sense from chaos. That's why you see faces in clouds and believe in karma. Ronnie goes deep on this, how your fundamental assumption of a meaningful world is tied to your desperate need for order. If something good happens, it must be because you deserved it. If something bad happens, you scramble for explanations. Randomness? That's the abyss you avoid at all costs, because it means there's no cosmic ledger balancing your good deeds against your sins. But here's the twist. Acknowledging randomness doesn't strip life of meaning, it forces you to create your own. The question is, are you bold enough to face that existential void? Now let's talk about fragility, your dirty little secret. You walk around as though you're invincible, invulnerable, the apex predator of your reality. But when trauma strikes, it rips away that comforting delusion. Suddenly, you're face to face with your own mortality, your own insignificance. Janoff-Bulman calls this the death imprint, a brutal reminder that you are, at the end of the day, a soft, fragile organism trying to survive in a world that doesn't care. Robbery, rape, accidents, these aren't just events, they're wake-up calls. They scream, you could have died. You still could, and it's not just your body that feels it. Trauma attacks the symbolic world too, the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you're worth. It leaves you naked, clawing at the ruins of your identity. When assumptions shatter, it's not a slow unraveling, it's an explosion. One moment, you believe in a benevolent, meaningful world. The next, you're thrust into a nightmare where nothing makes sense. This is the essence of trauma, Janoff-Bulman explains, the collapse of your inner world. You're not just grieving a loss, you're grieving the death of certainty itself. Survivors describe it as a free fall, a vertigo-inducing plunge into chaos, where even the ground beneath your feet feels like a lie. You look at the world through new, terrifying eyes, and suddenly nothing feels safe or familiar. It's not just a crack in your foundation, it's a total architectural collapse. And yet, this collapse is where the rebuilding begins, if you can find the courage to start. Self-blame is the first tool survivors reach for, and Janoff-Bulman unpacks this with relentless precision. There are two kinds, behavioral and characterological. Behavioral self-blame sounds like this: I shouldn't have gone back to his apartment. It's about what you did, and it gives you a sense of control. Like if you had made a different choice, the trauma wouldn't have happened. Characterological self-blame is darker, deeper. I'm a bad judge of character. It's not about what you did, it's about who you are. The former feels like a mistake you can fix. The latter feels like a fatal flaw. Survivors latch onto these narratives because they're desperate to make sense of the chaos. But here's the paradox. Blaming yourself, even incorrectly, feels safer than accepting that the universe is random and uncontrollable. It's a cruel coping mechanism, but it's one you cling to when the alternative is staring into the void. Here's where the magic, or the grit, happens. Trauma isn't just about survival, it's about interpretation. Janoff-Bulman reveals how survivors often reinterpret their experiences to find meaning or lessons. Maybe it taught them resilience. Maybe it deepened their empathy. Whatever the case, it's not about the event itself, but the story you tell about it afterward. Cognitive strategies like downward social comparison or finding benefits can transform pain into something manageable, even valuable. Though not the master of one's fate, she quotes Philip Brickman, one may still be captain of one's soul. That's the choice trauma survivors face: to be consumed by randomness or to wrestle meaning from it, no matter how tenuous or hard-won. Trauma has a funny way of stripping life down to its essentials. When your world collapses, so do all the superficial concerns that used to weigh you down. Janoff-Bulman calls this reprioritization, a kind of existential spring cleaning. Survivors often emerge with a clarity that's almost painful, a sense of what truly matters. The confrontation with mortality and chaos forces you to reevaluate everything: relationships, goals, even how you spend your time. Life becomes distilled, potent. Survivors often describe it as a kind of grim wisdom, the price of which is pain. And while it's no one's first choice for enlightenment, the depth of understanding it brings is undeniable. But wisdom comes with a cost, and Janoff-Bulman doesn't shy away from the social fallout of trauma. Survivors carry an invisible stigma, a mark of their encounter with chaos. They've seen the malevolence in the world, and it sets them apart. Others might not see the scars, but they sense the difference. Victims are often treated as deviants, reminders of a universe that isn't as kind or predictable as most would like to believe. This stigma isolates them further, creating a chasm between their new reality and the comforting illusions others still hold. It's a cruel irony. Having survived the worst, they now face the burden of being living proof that the world doesn't always make sense. This brings us to the question of recovery, a word Janoff-Bulman carefully critiques. Recovery implies a return to what was, but trauma changes you irreversibly. Survivors don't recover, they adapt. They build something new from the rubble of their shattered assumptions. Robert Weiss's term adaptation feels more honest, acknowledging that while you may find balance again, it won't be the same as before. Trauma strips away innocence and replaces it with a kind of hardened wisdom. You can relish the good because you face the bad. You learn to navigate a world that's both beautiful and terrifying. It's not about bouncing back, it's about moving forward, changed but stronger. So, why should you read Shattered Assumptions? Because it's not just a book about trauma, it's a guide to understanding how you construct your reality and what happens when it falls apart. Ronnie Janoff-Bulman doesn't offer easy answers or platitudes. She offers clarity, a way to see the scaffolding of your beliefs, and the courage to rebuild when it crumbles. This book is a masterclass in human fragility and resilience, a mirror for anyone brave enough to confront the chaos. And here's the kicker. Whether you face trauma or not, these lessons matter. Life doesn't promise benevolence, meaning, or fairness. But if you can face that truth, you can find something even more valuable, the strength to create your own meaning, your own path, your own peace. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the guts of human existence. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below. Let's keep this conversation alive. Your thoughts, your experiences, they matter. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who could use a little existential perspective. Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep building. See you soon.